What if the loneliness destroying you right now has absolutely nothing to do with how many people are in your life? What if you could be surrounded by your family, your friends, your partner, the people who genuinely love you, and still feel this hollow, aching emptiness that nobody can touch, nobody can fill, nobody can fix? Here is what nobody is brave enough to tell you. That loneliness is not about them, it is about you and the relationship you have been neglecting your entire life. It's a relationship with the person you wake up with every morning, the person you go to sleep with every night, the person whose voice you hear in every quiet moment, yourself. We have been taught that loneliness is a problem that people solve. So we call someone, we make plans, we scroll, we text, we perform connection like our lives depend on it. And yet, we still feel it, that unbearable silence inside, that invisible wall of glass between us and everyone we love. What I want to talk to you about today is the loneliness that connection cannot fix. And more importantly, the only thing that actually can. Because I promise you, what you are about to hear will not just change how you think about loneliness, it will change how you think about yourself. Stay with me. Full speech, how to heal the loneliness that connection can't fix. What if the most painful loneliness you have ever experienced was not caused by being alone? I want you to sit with that for a moment, because what I have learned through years of research, through thousands of stories shared with me in whispered voices and tearful confessions, is that the loneliness devastating our generation is not the loneliness of empty rooms and silent phones. It is the loneliness of living as a stranger to yourself. And before you dismiss that as something poetic and abstract, I want to be completely honest with you. I have sat across from people, brilliant, successful, deeply loved people who described their loneliness with the same raw, desperate language. And every single time when we dug deep enough, we did not find a lack of people in their lives. We found a lack of presence within themselves. We found someone who had been running so fast, performing so well, and showing up so perfectly for everyone else that they had completely forgotten to show up for themselves. And here is what that does to you. When you lose touch with yourself, when you stop knowing what you actually feel, what you actually believe, what you actually need, you become incapable of genuine connection. Because you cannot share what you do not have access to. You cannot offer your real self to another human being when you have not met your real self in years. So you perform connection instead of experiencing it. You sit at dinner tables and laugh at the right moments. You send the right texts. You show up to the right events. You say, I'm fine, with such practiced conviction that sometimes you almost believe it yourself. And meanwhile, underneath all of that performance, the loneliness sits there, patient, heavy, and utterly untouched by all of your social activity. What if the scrolling is not helping? What if the packed social calendar is not healing anything? What if every time you reach for your phone in a quiet moment, you are actually running from the most important thing, the conversation your soul is desperately trying to have with you? We are living in the most externally connected moment in human history. We have instant access to billions of people. We have technologies that our grandparents could not have imagined in their wildest dreams, and yet loneliness has been declared a global health epidemic. The Surgeon General of the United States has compared the health risks of loneliness to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day? That contradiction, all this connection, all this loneliness is not accidental. It is a direct result of what we have been taught connection actually is. We have been taught that connection is about proximity, about frequency, about visibility. But here's what the data actually shows. And here's what every honest conversation I have ever had confirms: true connection is about authenticity. And authenticity requires something terrifying. It requires you to know who you actually are. Now let me talk about the thing sitting right at the center of all of this loneliness, the thing we almost never name directly, and that thing is shame. Shame is the most socially communicable disease we never discuss. It is the voice that tells you that you are not enough, that you are too much, that if people truly saw you, not the curated version, not the performing version, but the actual complicated, contradictory, beautiful mess of you, they would leave, they would judge, they would confirm your deepest fear, which is that you are fundamentally unlovable. And so shame makes you hide, and hiding creates the very loneliness you are trying to escape. Here is the devastating irony. The parts of yourself you are most ashamed of, the parts you spend enormous energy concealing from the world, those are often the very parts that would create the deepest connection if you were brave enough to share them, because other people are carrying those same parts, other people are hiding those same shadows. And when someone is brave enough to say, here is my mess, here is my real self, here is the thing I am ashamed of, the room does not go cold. The room goes quiet, and then the room goes warm. Because recognition happens. Because people think, oh my God, me too. Me Too is the most powerful connection that exists between human beings. But you cannot get to Me Too if you are committed to pretending you are fine. Now I want to talk about belonging, because belonging is what we are actually seeking when we think we are seeking connection. And belonging has been one of the most misunderstood concepts in our cultural conversation. We have confused belonging with fitting in, and they are not just different, they are complete opposites. Fitting in is assessing a room and changing yourself to match it. Belonging is walking into a room as your whole self and trusting that you deserve to be there. Fitting in requires you to constantly betray yourself in small ways, changing your opinions, softening your edges, performing a version of yourself that you think people will accept. And every single one of those small betrayals adds a brick to the wall between you and genuine connection. The most heartbreaking thing I have ever witnessed is a person who has spent 40 years fitting into rooms that were never designed for them, wondering why they feel so profoundly alone. True belonging, the kind that actually feeds your soul, never requires you to abandon yourself at the door. It demands exactly the opposite. It demands that you show up as your full, unedited, unperformed self. And yes, that is terrifying, because not every room will welcome that. Not every person will be able to handle that. But here is the truth that changes everything. The right people, the real connections, the relationships that will actually nourish you, they cannot find you while you are hiding. They are looking for you, not your performance. Let me tell you something about grief, because grief lives at the heart of loneliness in a way we never discuss. Every deep loneliness contains unexpressed grief, grief for the relationship that ended and was never properly mourned, grief for the version of yourself you had to shrink or abandon to survive a particular season of life, grief for the love you deserved as a child that you never received, grief for the friendships that quietly faded, grief for the life you imagined you would be living by now. We are a culture that is medicated. We call someone strong if they bounce back quickly, as if grief were a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be honored. We fill the silence of grief with noise. We fill the space of grief with busyness, and the unprocessed grief sits inside us, creating a kind of internal weight that makes genuine connection feel impossibly heavy. When you finally give yourself permission to grieve, without rushing, without judgment, without numbing, something remarkable happens. The weight begins to lift. The internal space that was crowded with unexpressed pain begins to open up. And in that open space, real connection becomes possible for the first time. Grief is not the enemy of connection. Unprocessed grief is. And now I want to say something that might be the most countercultural thing I will say today. Solitude is not your enemy. I know we live in a world that treats silence like a malfunction, where the moment there is quiet, there is an algorithm designed to fill it, where being alone on a Saturday night feels like evidence of failure, where we have pathologized the simple, sacred act of being with yourself. But solitude, genuine, chosen, undistracted solitude, is where healing lives. The people I have met who carry the most magnetic, genuine, deeply connective energy in any room are universally people who have learned to be at home in their own presence. They are not afraid of themselves. They have sat with their own thoughts. They have had the hard internal conversations. They have learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. And because they are not desperate for connection, because they are not trying to fill an internal void with external noise, they attract authentic connection naturally and effortlessly. There is a profound difference between bringing your wholeness to a relationship and bringing your emptiness to a relationship. One creates nourishment, one creates dependency, one creates genuine intimacy, one creates the performance of intimacy while the loneliness quietly intensifies underneath. The healing I am talking about today does not begin with finding better people. It does not begin with downloading another app or making more plans or being more socially available. The healing begins in a moment of extraordinary, terrifying, beautiful courage, the moment you decide to stop running from yourself, the moment you sit in the silence and stay there long enough to hear what your own soul has been trying to tell you, the moment you look at the parts of yourself you have been hiding and say, you are allowed to exist here. The moment you let someone see you, really see you, and you do not manage their reaction or control the narrative, the moment you grieve what needs to be grieved. The moment you belong to yourself fully and without apology before you ask anyone else to belong to you. This is not easy work. I want to be honest about that. It is some of the hardest, most disorienting, most uncomfortable work a human being can do, because it requires you to face the parts of yourself you have spent years perfecting the art of avoiding. But on the other side of that work is something I can only describe as coming home, not to a place, to yourself. And when you come home to yourself, when you are no longer a stranger to your own inner life, the loneliness does not just decrease, it transforms. It becomes a signal rather than a sentence. It becomes information rather than evidence of your unworthiness. It becomes the beginning of a conversation rather than the end of hope. You were not designed to feel this lonely. You were not designed to perform your way through your entire life. You were not designed to be known by no one, including yourself. You were designed for the kind of connection that begins inside you, extends outward with courage and vulnerability, and creates relationships so real that the loneliness that once felt permanent finally begins to release its grip. That healing is possible, not through more connection, through more courage, the courage to come home to yourself first. Conclusion. What we have walked through today is not just a conversation about loneliness. It is a conversation about the bravest journey any human being can take, the journey back to themselves. We discovered that the loneliness tearing through our generation is not a shortage of people, it is a shortage of self-connection, self-honesty, and self-belonging. We uncovered shame as the architect of our isolation and vulnerability as the only true bridge between human souls. We honored grief as the missing conversation and solitude as the sacred practice that makes genuine connection possible. The path forward is not more noise, it is more honesty. It is not more performance, it is more presence. The world does not need another perfect version of you. The world, and more importantly you, needs your real, whole, unedited, courageous self to finally show up. Start there, start with yourself. Everything else follows.